This is the second Sunday of Advent, and in our Gospel reading, it talks about a voice in the wilderness, a voice in the desert, crying out, "Prepare a way for the Lord." And this is what the acclamation also stressed. A voice in the desert, prepare a way for the Lord. Now, Advent is a time of preparation, like I said last week. But I want us to take the three key words and look at these words and analyze them, so that we will be able to understand how best we need to prepare for the coming of the Lord. And one of those words is wilderness, the desert. The next word we'll also analyze is the voice. And the last word we will look at is the way. The desert, the voice, and the way. What exactly is a desert or a wilderness? It is a region that is uncultivated, uninhabited by humans. It is just some wide, a barren plain, a waste, a pathless place where there is no way. That is a desert. And what is a voice? A voice is that sound that comes out of the human mouth, whatever it may mean. It may be in words or in songs. And what is a way? We use these words all the time. What is a way? It is the process or that through which we pass, that through which we travel, that through which we leave a destination to another destination, a location to another destination. That is a way. And how is it relevant in our preparation for Advent? I said desert, right? So let us analyze desert. For me, desert is any aspect of our lives that God is not inhabiting. Remember, I said uninhabited desert. Any aspect of our lives that God is not inhabiting is a desert. Any aspect of our lives at all that God is not inhabiting is a desert. When we are filled with unforgiveness, that our attitude of unforgiveness becomes the desert. When we are filled with hate, that hatred attitude of ours becomes the desert. When we are filled with envy, with jealousy, these things becomes our desert. When we are filled with greed, malice, bitterness, unfaithfulness, unchastity, fornication, adultery, profane talks, hostility towards one another, impure thoughts, unfaithfulness, infidelity, lies, anger, bitterness, All these things are deserts because God do not inhabit in these attitudes. So, a voice in the desert crying out, prepare a way for the Lord. A voice. The voice really is the attitude of change which should begin now. And the voice also is our attitude towards prayer, asking God to help us. The voice in the desert is our attitude now towards changing that which is desert, changing that which God does not inhabit in us. And prayer also, begging God to help us to change. That is the voice in the desert. And what is the way? The way is actually changing. If I am filled with unforgiveness, to become the process of changing to become a forgiving person, and then learn to forgive. That is the way. But for me, truly, the way in the context of Advent, because sometimes we are so engraved in sin, and then sometimes we don't know how to come out of it. So how do we even come out of it when we don't really have the willpower to say no to some of the sins we struggle with? So the way is actually making a way for Jesus, so that when he comes, he will make a way for us out of our struggles. So the way we should prepare for God is making a way for him to make a way for us to go out of that which we are struggling with. So when you hear the verse again, a voice in the desert crying out, prepare a way for the Lord. A voice in the desert, a voice in our sinfulness, the voice of our prayer in our sinful life, asking God to come and rescue us from our deserts. That is what it means. That is what it means. In Genesis chapter 21, from verse 8 to 21, when Hagar and her son was in the desert and they ran out of water, Hagar practically left the child to die there. The child was crying in the desert, and God came to the rescue of Hagar and her son by providing water for them. The water became the way. So the voice of the baby in the desert, the voice of the cry of the baby in the desert, and then God heard that cry and provided a way, the water. So when we cry in our desert, asking God to come and help us persistently and constantly, he definitely hears and comes to answer. In Exodus chapter 14, when the children of Israel in the desert were faced with the Red Sea and then the Egyptians coming behind there to kill them, when they cried in the desert, God parted the Red Sea for them to go through. Our cry will save us. In the same Exodus chapter 15 verse 22, they cried again in the desert, and God turned the bitter water so that it won't be bitter again, so that they will be able to drink. Exodus chapter 16 from verse 1 to 4, they were hungry in the desert, the children of Israel, and they cried in the desert, and God provided manna for them, a way out of hunger. Again, a way. In Exodus chapter 17 from verse 1 to 4, they were thirsty. They cried again in the desert, and then he provided water for them, a way out of tests. In Numbers chapter 21 from verse 4 to 5, when out of their stubbornness they rebelled against God, and then serpents beat them, and then they were dying. When they cried to God, a voice in the desert, again, God provided a golden serpent. And then they looked up to that serpent and they got their healing. The voice. We need in this period of Advent to pray constantly to God, to hear our voice and lead us out of our desert. He will surely lead us out of our desert, because He has promised. Like in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 13, it says, I will make a way for you out of temptation. That He will make a way for you and I out of temptation. That is a promise. In Isaiah chapter 43 verse 19, again He says, I will make a way for you in the deserts. In Proverbs chapter 3 from verse 5 to 6, He promised, He said, I will strengthen your path for you. In John chapter 14 verse 6, He says, I am the way. Jesus saying now that I am the way. So we need to prepare a way for Christ, so that He will prepare a way for us to get out of our deserts. So we need to pray. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 from verse 16 to 18, it says, pray constantly. Philippians chapter 4 from verse 6 to 7, it says, pray about anything and everything. Pray about anything and everything. In Mark chapter 11 verse 24, it says, whatever you ask from me in prayer, believing that you have received it, you will receive it. In Psalms 18 verse 6, it says, in my distress I called to the Lord and He answered me. In my distress I called to the Lord and He answered me. Let us cry relentlessly, constantly to the Lord, begging Him to lead us out of our deserts. I know my own deserts, and I'm very sure you know your own desert. Those are those aspects of our lives that God is not happy with. God is not inhabiting. Those are those aspects of our lives that withers the good aspect of our lives. So if I'm somebody filled with hate, that hatred is withering the love I'm supposed to give to my neighbor. We are aware of our witherness. Let us cry to Him, so that when He comes at Christmas, He will make a way for us out of our desert. God bless you.